My name is Randy Zucker, and together with Karen Sanders, we run the Arts and Culture programming here at the JCC, and it's so good to see all of you here this evening. We are thrilled to be able to celebrate the release and launch of Debbie's first novel. We're incredibly proud of this accomplishment, really. It's a great read, and we're excited to hear from Debbie this evening. And I want to invite Mindy Goldberger, who is going to say a few words and introduce our esteemed guest, a member of our family.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I wonder how many people in this room ever thought about writing a novel. Let me see your hands if you have. I thought about it, but I didn't do it, right? I wonder how many people actually did it, right? Anybody? No. Okay, well, our speaker tonight is extraordinary because she's done both, right? She's thought about it and she actually did it. And what makes it even more special for us tonight is that this is not just any author, not just anybody who just wrote a book. This is one of us, as you heard Randy say, part of our family. Somebody that most of us in this room knows. Does everybody here know Deb? Yeah. So somebody we all know. Okay, so we all know Deb Feldman, our friends, mother of 3 wonderful children, wife of David, right? We know Deb as someone who is smart and capable and creative. We know Deb the gardener, Deb the cook, Deb the tennis player, Deb the, Deb the co-chair. Yes, Deb the community volunteer and leader who's done almost everything at JCC, right? We know beautiful singing the national anthem. We know so many things about Deb Feldman. Can you stop here? But we don't know Deborah Green, the author, right? And we are so privileged tonight to have Deborah Green, the author, here with us at our JCC, at her JCC, at her home away from home. It's a very special night that we're all here together. I don't know if any of you know, I read this somewhere, that November is National, like, wanna be an author month or something like that. Okay. Yes. And I need to say that on a personal level, Deb has been a role model and a mentor for me on so many levels. And I'm inspired by her novel and by having the opportunity to hear her speak here tonight. And I don't know what's going to happen in November. Maybe one of us, not just me, maybe all of us will be inspired to follow in Deb's footsteps and write a novel. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, we're going to talk about the convention of wives. Deb Feldman, Deborah Green's first novel. And I am very excited now to introduce to you my friend and yours, our friend, our family member. I really want to stop now because I really think it's better than that. Thank you, Mindy, very much. I've known Mindy for a long time. I really appreciate it. Can you hear me up? All those really kind words. Thank you. And it's called NaNoWriMo. So in the month of November, people attempt to write an entire novel. So if you're interested, it's NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo. So
get going on your novel. I want to thank Mindy, but I also want to thank Randy and Karen who helped plan this event. I really appreciate it. And I've known them for a long time and worked with them on events. I know what this takes, so thank you. And although she's not here, I want to thank Lisa Bleish and the committee for agreeing to have me. I really appreciate that very much. The JCC, you stole my line, so that's quite a thing. Has always been a home away from home for me, especially this JCC. I've served on the board twice, and I've been chair of a couple of committees along the way, and was very involved in the founding of the One Book program, at which you're going to hear Lisa Barr speak about her book, and I hope you come to that, although I'm not going to be in town, but she's a fabulous speaker, so I hope you get to see her. Our kids went to the preschool here, we made our friends here. So this really was our place from the moment we came into town. And I'm sure a lot of you know what I mean because it means the same to you. And not only this JCC has been a home away from home, but I wanted to tell you all a story about our family when it was much younger. Samantha was 2 years old, Zachary was 6 months old. And we lived in Durham, North Carolina at the time. David was doing some training, medical training down there, my husband David. And we had to go for 6 months to Louisville, Kentucky, and for a hand fellowship. And we left in December from Durham, and we drove through West Virginia, and we hit a snowstorm. And we came into Louisville, Kentucky in 3 feet of snow, knowing no one, not knowing where we were. We got situated in a condo with our 2-year-old and our 6-month-old, got a few groceries. And as soon as we got plowed out, the first place we went was the Louisville JCC. And when we got there, the membership director asked if we wanted to take a tour, which we did. And she said, and would you like to put your children in the nursery? Well, we had been with them for 48 hours nonstop, going through the snow, through the tunnels. And I don't know if any of you have driven through West Virginia, but without snow, it is treacherous. With snow, it is absolutely terrifying. So those words were amazing. Did we want to? Yes, please take our children, take them now. So she took them, she put them in the nursery, and we got a great tour. And it felt like pretty much any JCC, and it was a good feeling for us. But the best feeling was at the end of the tour, we went back to her office and they said, we're here for 6 months. We're wondering if you can prorate the annual fee. Is there anything you can do for us? We're on a resident salary. And she turned to us and she said, why don't you just make a donation, whatever you think is appropriate. We want you here. You're part of our JCC family. We really don't care what you give us. We want you here. So it was wonderful. And we have a similar feeling here. And I hope we extend that. I know we extend that to families who come here as well. So once again, the JCC in my home, away from home, wherever I am. I am nervous up here a little bit. I'm still new at this. I've been doing it for about 2.5 weeks. And this is about my 7th talk. So I'm a little better, but I'm nervous. There is a theory that, and some of you may have heard this because I stole this from a Federation event a couple of weeks ago, so don't get me up. But there's a theory that if you have lunch with girlfriends, your stress level goes down. There are statistics that support that, and I see a bunch of you nodding, and I think it's true. Talking to other women is helpful. And you can prove a lot of things with statistics. I know with the politics going on in the elections, people use statistics in many ways to prove their point, but this is a theory that I actually believe in. So I'm going to ask you to join me in a construct. And those of you I don't know as well, those of you I know, you're my girlfriends. Those of you I don't know as well, I'm going to adopt you as my temporary, or you can be my full-time girlfriends. I could always use a few more. And in that way, I'm going to pretend we're just at lunch and my stress level is going to go down and maybe your stress level is going to go down. We'll see what happens. So are you joining me?
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'd like to ask you if, like me, Passover is one of your favorite holidays. How many people in the room would pick of all the holidays, Passover as your favorite? Anybody? Rebecca's saying no, because I know what she does for Passover. She's saying no, it's too hard. Hello, that's something I'm writing. Passover is really my favorite holiday. I love the traditions. I enjoy reading the Haggadah that reminds us of our journey to freedom. I like the family. I like the food. I even like matzah. Some people don't even like matzah. So I am going to do something called R&D. Does anybody know what R&D stands for? Research and development. Usually it's research and development, but it has tonight a different meaning. Rob and deploy. I am going to rob and deploy a format from the Haggadah, otherwise known, a section of the Haggadah, as the 4 questions. Are some of you familiar with the 4 questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm not going to ask anybody to recite them. But tonight, I'm going to refer to them as 4 questions, and that will be the format. I'll be asking 4 questions and answering them. But I like to also refer to them as, in Yiddish, the 4 kashas. So here we go. De erste kasha, the first question. Rebecca, if I don't pronounce anything correctly, just correct my Yiddish. I would appreciate it. How did I become an author? What was my journey to this podium? My journey was a little bit like the stock market, up, down, sideways, down, up, very much not a straight line. I'm sure lately, down, down, down. You really don't want to know about the stock market, but that really graphically, visually sort of depicts my journey. There were times when I wrote, there were times when I didn't write, there were times when I got back to it passionately, depending on what I was working on. They say that we are who we come from. My dad, David, was a 2nd-generation American. His parents, Florence and Sam, owned a soda shop in Westfield on South Avenue, right where the store that was bocce. It's something else now. I think it's Mexican-American food, but out there it was called bocce. That cafe used to be Green Soda Shop. And 2 flights up, my father and his sister and my grandparents lived in an apartment for quite some time. And my grandfather, Sam, besides owning the soda shop, did a few things on the side, including accounting and pest extermination. He did anything he could to make ends meet. And so it's not surprising that my dad did not become a pest exterminator, but became a CPA. And my mom, Joan, was a homemaker, but she was also always very artistic, and she painted murals on a few of the walls in our home and wanted really to be a dress designer. But in those days, a lot of women, as in our days still, maybe a little better now, don't always get to pursue their dreams. So those were my parents. And my mom came from a background that was difficult. Her parents, Bella and Franz, lived in Berlin, Germany, and Bella was a homemaker and Franz was a master tailor. And in 1939, Franz had already fled to Warsaw because he couldn't get work in Berlin as a Jew anymore. And he left Bella with my mother, who was 5, my Uncle Herbie, who was 7 at the time, and a newborn baby, Dina. And some of you will note that Dina is the name of the protagonist in the book. And unfortunately, Dina and my grandmother and grandfather did not survive the war. Dina and my grandmother were murdered in Auschwitz, and my grandfather died in the Warsaw Ghetto. But my mother and her brother were very lucky that her mother made the very brave decision in 1939 to put them on a train as part of the Kindertransport and send them out of Berlin, which saved their lives. And they were sent to Southport, England, where they were raised by an aunt and uncle, and then sent to the United States when my mom was 14 to be raised first in Newark and then in Maplewood, New Jersey. And the stories of my parents' upbringing inform who they are, but also inform the stories that they told me and they told my brother. My mother, every night before we would go to bed when we were little, used to tell us the story of the chicken people. And there was a new story every night that she would continue, and she would bribe us to go to sleep and close our eyes by promising that the story would continue the next night. And I don't really remember the details of the stories, except for the fact that they were called chicken people. And it wasn't until years later that I understood the genesis of these stories, or at least my psychobabble explanation for the genesis. When my mom went to Southport, England, her aunt and uncle raised chickens in the backyard. And her job was to feed and take care of the chickens, collect the eggs, feed them, clean up after them. And they became pets to her. She loved them. But every Friday, her aunt would go into the yard and pick the lucky chicken that got to be Shabbos dinner. And the aunt would wring the chicken's neck and pass the chicken to my mother, and my mother's job was to pluck the chicken. And to this day, my mother really does not like chicken, not her favorite thing. And I like to think that the chicken people stories were her way of inventing a future for her friends who didn't make it, a new ending. At least that's what I like to think. My dad, on the other hand, was a real kibitzer. We would go out to local restaurants, and he would take a cloth napkin from a table, and we would be seated. He would put it on his arm, get up, go table to table, and he would tell people what his favorite cocktail was, what the entrees were, guide them in their choices. And they all thought he was the maitre d'. And he would come back to the table. We would be sitting there, dying. And he would have such a good time doing these kinds of things. Besides having a sense of humor, though, I always thought my dad was challenged verbally, because he told both my brother and myself that he really wanted to be a doctor, but he had a problem with words. And I didn't know if he was dyslexic and hadn't been diagnosed at that time. So I never thought of him as a writer, really. But a couple of years ago, I was going through my mom's things, and I came across a group of love letters that he had written her when he was stationed in Japan during the Korean War. And they're beautiful. They're descriptive. What the mountains look like, what the people wore, the smells, all the sights in Japan. But more than that, he talked about his longing to come back and to be with her. And they weren't engaged yet. And I just didn't picture him as being so romantic, but he really was. And I don't know what kind of verbal problem he really had, but he didn't. So those were my first storytellers. I'm sure your parents told you stories too. So that's my heritage. What about me? I always loved science and the arts. I grew up in Linden, New Jersey, home of Exxon Corporation. And when I was in 6th grade, I was sent there to represent my school. I don't know why they picked me, but I was as equally fascinated by the refining that went on, the procedures that they described to us, as I was by the camera that they gave me at the end, with which I took some of my first photographs. So again, science and the arts combined. I've always had a garden from the time I could plant a seed, and some of you have seen my vegetable garden. I really like to, I'm a frustrated farmer, but I like doing the gardening, and I like planning and figuring out what needs more water, what needs more light, but I also like photographing things in my garden. So again, the science and the arts combined. In high school, my favorite subject was biology. But I'm going to brag now that I won in senior year Best Actress for my role as Emily in Our Town. And in that show, I starred across from Steven Weinberg, who some of you know, who I actually went steady with in 6th grade, and who still lives in Scotch Plains. So there's some people, you have to be nice to everybody, because some people follow you, and just, don't tell Stevie, but they're always there. I love the guy, but some people are always there. From there, I went on to Rutgers, where I studied biology and psychology. I thought about going to medical school. At that time, there were not as many female mentors for women to discuss what it would be like to have a family and to pursue such a demanding career. And I think Had I met somebody or known somebody a little bit better who could have guided me, I might have decided to go to medical school, but I was a little unsure of that. And at the same time, I applied for a master's in public health in Columbia and decided to go that route. And while I was at Rutgers studying biology, I was also in musicals in my spare time. So again, science and art, science and art. And it was at my third job after getting my master's in public health that I had my own meet cute. Does anyone know what a meet cute is? I'm gonna look at Susan. No, meet cute. It is that romantic moment in a movie, in a show, when a boy meets girl, there's a spark, and you know they've fallen in love. So I was working at Roosevelt Hospital. I was the emergency room administrator, and it was summer. And the new residents had just started in the ER. We had surgical and medical residents. And I knew them, but I didn't know them well. And there was an 1199 strike. 1199 was the union to which all of the support staff belong. I see you nodding, so you know that. And so the housekeepers, the dietitians, the laundry staff, all the support staff, including all of my clerical staff, walked out onto the picket line. So we had no staff supporting our services, and the services had to continue. So what did they do? They took the people who knew the least about how to accomplish anything in the hospital, and those were the first-year residents. And they had them doing laundry, they had them running meals, and the lucky ones, 5 of them, got to be my clerks. And I was 27, single in the city, and they handed me 5 medical and surgical interns, residents, and all male. And I picked the tallest and the cutest and the smartest and the nicest. And the one who had this melodic voice, he was a DJ in college and before that. And I dated him and I married him. And David likes to say that he's been working for me ever since. So this leads us to the second question, the Snate's Akasha. Of all the things to write about, why the Convention of Wives? Why the story of Dina and Julia? They say that you write what you know. I've been a daughter my entire life, a girlfriend to many along the way. I've been in healthcare for over 20 years, not sequentially, but in total. I've been a mother for 34 years and a wife for 36 years. And all of these roles, I honestly can say to you, mostly have been an amazing blessing. But all of them came with stresses and strains. I see a lot of you shaking your heads, so I think you know what I mean. What were some of my struggles? David and I decided that I would stay home from work when we had children. He had a very demanding career in training and going to practice as a surgeon. But I don't think either of us knew what that really meant, what it meant for our relationship, what it meant for my identity, what it would feel like to both of us. And a lot of the time, I felt like a single mom. I felt isolated. We moved away from family down to Durham, North Carolina, as I mentioned, and then to Louisville. And I didn't feel very supported. At Duke, we had actually a support group for residents' wives. And it was a terrific thing. We used to get together, sit around a table and cry. We were all miserable. We were exhausted. We had little kids. This was our only break, getting together. We hired a babysitter so we could get together and cry. And one of the women got up, and her husband was a few years ahead of ours in training. And she said, you really have to gain a little perspective, ladies. This is not for forever. You're going to move somewhere else, probably closer to home, to family again. You're going to have more support. You may go back to work. You may get help in the home. Things are going to change. And so we're here for you for now. And, we should all support each other, but things will get better. And those became my sisters because they really understood the struggle we were going through. In a similar way to all young mothers who have husbands and spouses now, who have husbands or wives who have very demanding careers, we did feel somewhat put upon. But she made us feel that, that things would change. And we really were there with phone calls for each other, with play dates, and to watch each other's children when we could. And I've had girlfriends along the way, and that's been wonderful. But relationships, whether they're marriages or girlfriends or whatever, can also be somewhat problematic at times. There can be a lack of trust, there can be miscommunications, there can be jealousies along the way, and sometimes there are cliques, you're in, you're out, you don't know why, you lose a friend, you gain a friend, you don't know why. And so sometimes I personally had struggles maintaining friendships with girlfriends, or for me being a part of a large girl group. I've never been really great at girl groups. So that's been a struggle as well, and something that I think I reflected in the conventional wives. As I mentioned, I stayed home with the kids, and I really felt a loss of personal identity. I got an education. I worked for about 8 years in healthcare before Dave and I got married, before we had kids. And I lost that. I wasn't doing that anymore. I had spit up on me all day. I wasn't talking to adults. I wasn't feeling intellectually stimulated. And I did that for 13 years. I schlepped the kids to Hebrew school and to ballet and to soccer. And I did do things to regain my identity. In large part, I volunteered here at the JCC, and I got to use some of my administrative skills and got to feel confident again and needed. And that was all wonderful. But mostly, I had become Sam, Zach, and Jesse's mom. I was Joan's daughter. I was David's wife. In effect, where did I go, Bernadette? Where was I? What happened to Debbie? I felt like I had disappeared. And also marriage. You know, mostly our marriage has been terrific, but there were struggles. We didn't see each other a lot for many years. We just didn't see each other a lot. And when we did, we were tired, we were cranky. We weren't supportive of each other. We didn't have any energy left to do that. And we couldn't take vacations at the beginning. We didn't have time. We didn't have money. And we were each dealing with our own stresses during the day. His at work, me at home, and then we come together and, you know, what was left? Not much. So we did struggle through a little bit, and we had to make an effort, which we did, to always have a Saturday night date, kind of regain a little bit of connection. But we really had to work at it. It was a difficult time. So about 10 years into David's medical practice, he turned to me and he said, you know, I'm really thinking about getting an MBA. I was so angry. I had been home all these years, didn't know who I was anymore. And he wanted to once again expand his career, his professional expertise. And I was, you know, cleaning up the house, cleaning up after kids and running around. And I really was angry. And I said to him, that's fine, but if you decide to go for a law degree, you're doing it with your second wife. I am not going to be here. And furthermore, I am going back to work. And I heard it come out of my mouth, and I thought, okay, I want to go back to work. And maybe I wanted that for a little while. And he said, that's great. I totally support you. I am there for you 100%. However, I don't have any bandwidth to absorb anything. So you're going to have to make whatever arrangements, whatever help you need to do that. And I thought, okay. And then, you know, but I'm there for you. I'm there for you. I support you, but I can't really do anything to help you. So I found it a little ironic, and I did arrange it. And some of you may wonder, you know, why I didn't get help before that to let me get out of the house, to go back to work. And part of that is who I am. You know, everybody feels differently about having help in the house. I tried it a few times. I wasn't particularly comfortable with it. Maybe I wasn't trusting enough with my children with somebody else. So for me, that was something that didn't work. I know a lot of women for whom that really worked well, but that was just not the case for me. So I waited until our youngest was almost ready to enter high school and to make that decision. And I did hire somebody to be there after school, and my daughter wanted nothing to do with her at that point, but I worked it out so that I went back to work at that point and went back to healthcare and back to hospitals, and eventually wound up writing grants for 2 places, North Beth Israel Medical Center. Anybody here born there besides me? 1, 2, 3. 3 of us, yay. You can get a certificate, you know, if you were born in December. You can make a donation, get a certificate. So I did fundraising there, gave out certificates for people who were born there. And I also worked for Children of Bellevue at Bellevue Hospital. And Bellevue Hospital supplies services for some of the most indigent children in New York City and a large immigrant population. So doing that work was really worthwhile. I felt like I knew who I was again. I was doing great things, and things were going really, really well with that, and continued for a couple of years. And then there was a point that there was a lull in work at both North Beth Israel and Children of Bellevue. We kind of weren't working on any major projects, and I was thinking maybe I'll do something different. And you know, things happen. Timing is everything. And a couple of weeks into having these thoughts, my mom had a stroke, and I needed to take a break just to get her settled. And while I was doing that, I got some coverage for her, and David and I went away to a medical conference, one of the many I had been to with him over the years. And I was sitting by the pool and looking at about 30 women who looked sort of like me, with our novels on our knees and trying to take a break from children at home or whatever we were going through at home. And I wondered, you know, what were their circumstances? Were they working? Were they at home with kids? Had they figured out that magic easier than I had? Were their marriages happy, or were they strained? Were they happy to be here with their husbands, or not really happy to be here with their husbands? And at that time, they were mostly women. Now it would be the convention of spouses, I guess, but you know, this was a while back. We were mostly women. And I wanted to draw them into a sharing circle and ask some questions, but I was about 2 Bloody Marys in, so I had a little buzz on, and I was a little bit shy. And instead of bringing them to me, I sat there thinking about who they were. And I came up with these 2 characters, Dina and Julia, and I outlined about 13 plot points for what became the Convention of Wives. So sometimes I'm not a proponent of drinking a lot, but alcohol sometimes gets the creative juices flowing. So I had this outline, and I had at some point about 50 pages written. And while I was attending to what my mother needed, I thought, you know, if I'm not going to be working during this time, I'm going to do something for myself. And I signed up for a writing class. And if any of you, I know that Mindy asked you before, had entertained the idea of writing a novel or writing a memoir or something, I would totally suggest to you that you go and take a class. It gives you a lot of things, and I'm going to allude to them in a little bit, but it was one of the best steps that I ever took. And at the first class, I had to read a synopsis of the book, just a paragraph. And I was shaking, nervous, schwitzing. And I thought these 6 people in my writing class, and this is at, by the way, the Writers Circle in Summit, they do a great job. I just thought they'd all think I was crazy. But I read the paragraph, and afterwards, one next to me knocked on my shoulder, and she said, you know, I really hope you finish your novel, because I really want to hear what happens to these women. So it was very empowering, and I thought maybe I can do this, and I would give it a try. And that brings us to the 3rd question, to Takasha. What is it like to be an author? So as I mentioned, I take writing class, and that's one of the things that's given me a sense of community. I'm also part of the Columbia Alumni Writing Group, and that's a weird group. There are a lot of, this is being recorded, right? Interesting people. There are a lot of interesting people in the group. And the thing that scares me the most are the young writers in the group and what they write about the future of this earth, these dystopian novels, and I get terrified when I read the writing. On Tuesday and Thursday, I'm part of Shut Up and Write. I have some Shut Up and Write writers here with me, and the ladies. And I met them right as COVID hit, and they really kept me structured and writing during COVID, and really provided a nice community of people, and I got to know them, and they're wonderful. And the other thing it's given me is clearly an outlet for my creativity, but in a structured way. And it's been a challenge. I've learned a lot more about technology than I ever thought I would. I know things about all these apps like MailChimp and Wix and Canva design apps and email apps, and Randy's laughing. I knew nothing about these things, and it was difficult, and my children were so annoyed with me every time I would poll a question. Zach, my son, would always say, Mom, first of all, you can Google that, just Google it. And it is also very much below my pay grade. He's a software designer, so did not want to answer my questions. And the last thing that it has given me is an answer to the age-old question at a cocktail party, and what do you do? So, you know, when I was a stay-at-home mom, it was very hard to conceptualize what my day really was. I did about 50 things, from one thing to the next thing. I'm not sure how you really describe what you did during that day, so I would have a problem. But, you know, this, I can give an answer, and people seem to be very interested that somebody's a writer. And I think it's because it gives them an opening to talk to you about personal things in their life, in your life. They think that you're mostly a very open person, which I think writers tend to be. And it provides a comfort level with somebody who's really a stranger. So I really enjoy saying that when I meet new people. Defer to passion, the fourth question, what's coming next? For the Convention of Wives and for me as a writer. With the Convention of Wives, I've started speaking, and I've spoken to groups in Denver and New Haven and Miami and Boca Raton, and I have speaking engagements coming up, and in part that's due to the Jewish Book Council, which is an amazing organization that I participated in. And I am editing my second novel, which is tentatively called Mahjong Maras. So I'm hoping that comes out maybe in about a year and a half or two from now. And if you want more information about my novels and what's happening with events, you can go to my website at debragreenwriter.com. So I am going to leave you with a couple of final thoughts. But before I do, I did not want to forget that if you have read the book, and if you happen to buy the book tonight, which I would love for you, for somebody else as a gift, I would really appreciate it after you read it if you go on Amazon or Goodreads and you put up a review. Because when you get a lot of reviews, it does something to the algorithm on Amazon, and it helps with your publicity. So please review, and I hope it's a good review. If you really don't like it, maybe don't do a review. But I would really like you to do a review. So these are really my final thoughts. You are never too old to reinvent yourself, as I have discovered. And I would really encourage you to try something new, try something scary, to stretch yourself. That vulnerability is absolutely a strength, whether you take a new art class, you start reading something, a genre that you never thought you'd be interested in, or you take a new exercise class, or something that you have always wanted to try. Life is not a rehearsal. This is it. So you really should get out there and try something. And you really have more to gain than to lose. You can make a mistake. What's going to happen? You make a mistake. I'd like to read you a quote from a book that I loved called Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. Whenever you start doubting yourself, whenever you feel afraid, just remember, courage is the root of change. So no more holding yourself back. Do not allow your talents to lie dormant, ladies. Design your own future. Ask yourself what you will change, and then get started. Thanks very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Debbie. I feel like I know you so much better now. I want to thank you all for being here and encourage you to please come and check out the Convention of Wives. Debbie will be here signing books. I know a couple of people brought them for signing, so I can answer some questions. Yeah. And then, are there any? So come back. Okay. Are there any questions for Debbie? Ms. Needle.
So forward. Yes. So you see that part of the novel was born from was this convention,
of wives.
Yeah. The wives. So how did you, was there a way that you developed these characters? Was there anything that you did in the process of creating this novel that structure, and then or did just things kind of come to you as you? So the characters really are conglomerations of people I've known, other doctors' wives, and some women who are not doctors' wives, and whether they're physical description of the women, or their personality, psychology behind them. They're really a conglomeration of people. And I think they developed over time as I was writing, and as the storyline evolved, it evolved in a way to support the people I envisioned them being. And I don't want to go into detail, but each woman had struggles as she grew up in different ways. And it was part of the person she became. And I think, you know, as a writer, we really want to multi-layer the character. You want them to feel real. Everybody is complex. Nobody's all good. Nobody's all bad. Everybody has struggles. Nobody's had a perfect life. So I think you want to give a character all of that. And in fact, not to go on too long to answer you, but I was speaking to another group, and I was explaining that when I was developing the book, I worked with a developmental editor who asked me to take out all of the historical chapters. She wanted it to be only a contemporary story. And I had an issue with that on several levels, one of which was that I thought thematically it was important for me to bring across that people are who they come from. You inherit your traditions, you inherit your genetics, you inherit the psychology of who the parents are, who the grandparents are, what they've been through. But also with one character in particular, and that's Julia's husband, John. And I'm not going to say too much, some of you haven't read it, but he is not really a good guy in the book. And two of the chapters I had to cut explain where he came from. And someone said last night who I was speaking to, he's sort of the missing beetle. You know, you don't really know his background. He just is in the current day. And I felt bad because not understanding what he went through as a child gives him little explanation for his current actions. And I think had I been able to keep that in the book, he would have come across as a more sympathetic character. So that's a long-winded answer and a little more than you asked. But yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I want to know.
It's
I want to know how long it took you to write the book, the whole process, and also during your writing days, how long did you sit at the computer and work?
The book took about 8 years from beginning to where we are now. The writing of the book, I think, took about 3 years, and most of that was spent in writing class workshopping. So writing, rewriting, cutting, and then I worked with a developmental editor for about 1.5 years. And this is the woman with whom I argued about the historical chapters. Her name is Brenda Copeland. She was terrific. And it was fun. You know, it was fun. She knew the book almost better than I did. She knew my characters, she understood them, and it was like having somebody inside my head who I could talk to about, about the story. It was really great. And then from the time I got the publisher, it was another 2 years before the book came out. So 3.5 to I don't know if that adds up to 7 or 8, but around 8 years. Yeah. So, and was there another question?
The question was, like, during the days of writing, not editing, but how much time do you devote per day?
So I am not the most disciplined person, and maybe I'll be a little kinder to myself. I have a lot of other things drawing upon me. My children, although they're adults and married, still need me. We planned 3 weddings in the course of 4 years. So I was busy, at least, the final writing of this was the first wedding and the second wedding actually. And the rescheduling of the second wedding, the rescheduling of the third wedding. But anyway, so I was busy with that, and also, still caring for my mom a little bit. And I travel with my husband. So, a lot of things pull upon you. And I was frenetically writing, actually editing, and it was probably not healthy when I was planning my oldest daughter's wedding, and I couldn't sleep at night. So I was up at 3 a.m. anyway, and I think it added in a way to my creativity, you know, to be up at really strange hours in a sleep-deprived state. But I wrote a lot from like 3 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the morning for a long period of time. It was a little weird. But I don't really have a certain time of day. I try to find a block of time that I can, but right now, doing all this publicity, I'm finding very little time for that. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes.
That's a very long process.
Yeah.
Of the writing, editing, publishing, speaking, marketing, what gives you the most joy? Like, which part did you enjoy the most?
So I will say until I started speaking, the thing that I enjoyed the most was really just the writing. And second to that, I really like going to writing class and hearing other people's writing and giving feedback, because you learn a lot when you do that. But I enjoy the interaction with other writers. I think that's something I enjoy. Maybe I enjoy different things about it. I shouldn't say I just enjoy the writing. And now that I'm speaking, I'm having, you know, I'm a little nervous about it, but when people start asking questions and have thoughts about the novel, especially people who have read it, it's really funny sometimes to hear what they think and what they wonder about me. You know, so I'm liking that too. I'm liking meeting people. So a lot of different things about it. Yeah.
Debbie,
Miriam,
I'm just curious, is it hard to find these people to support you, like the development person and all that? Is it hard to find those people?
Yeah, so getting published is really crazy. It is a ridiculous industry right now. I think there are only five publishers left at this point, major traditional publishers, but there are all these little indie presses, smaller publishers. And the rules have changed. You know, some people are self-publishing, but if you self-publish your book, I would say, you know, for some people doesn't have the same cachet as if you're published by a publisher. And so then there are the traditional publishers, the big houses and the smaller indie presses. And then there's something called a hybrid press. And that's what I went with, that's She Writes Press. And they don't take everybody, they take about 35 to 40 really women. They do mostly female authors in the fall and in the spring, and they vet who applies to them and they pick you. So I was happy that I was picked. But I'm going to be transparent with you. There is a fee that you pay them, and for that, you get a higher percentage of the dollar per book that you earn when it's bought on Amazon. So it is not a money-making industry for an author, it really isn't, unless Reese Witherspoon, if you're out there listening, or Oprah, you know, option you for Netflix or for a movie. And that's really, you know, for writers, that's a way of making money. But usually publication of the book itself, unless you sell hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies, is not really money making. So again, a lot of people are self-publishing because people have those computer skills and it's become less difficult. But it's hard breaking through for a new writer. So I tried to get an agent. I didn't try for long enough probably. And I did get a couple that were really interested, and I wouldn't say strung me along, but they wanted more of, you know, the book. And for about 6 months, there were about 3 or 4 agents that, you know, dragged me along. And then I kind of had it. So I decided I would try for the hybrid press, and I wasn't really expecting a yes, and I got a yes. So that's really what happened. Yeah. And you have a question.
You talk about writing in lots of time. Do you write in stream of consciousness and put everything down that's coming to you within these characters, or do you mold your work a little bit at a time and going to, you know, concentrate on this character or this piece?
So there's something called, tell me if I got this right, plotters or pantsers, right? So plotters are people sort of like me. I wrote up 13 plot points. So I had a guide for what I was going to write and an idea about who the characters would be, not all of them, but some of them. And pantsers are people, I guess it's by the seat of your pants, you just write and whatever comes out. So because I had an outline, I actually wrote the end of the book fairly early in the process. I knew where it was going. And that scene, actually, that's not the last scene. I don't want to give it away, but if you've read the book, you will know which scene this is. It's a scene involving Rolf, Rob's cousin, and Rosie. And when they meet, it's their scene. And I saw that very vividly. It's a later scene. And at some point, that was the end of the book. And I had to push that up it was suggested to me that I pushed that further up, and I did. So certain scenes came quickly, and I wrote them very quickly. And other scenes I struggled with. But I knew for the plot they had to be there. And I, that was a little more difficult. But a lot of it for this novel was pretty organic. And maybe it's because it was my first novel. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm editing the second novel, and that came fairly easily too. That's just a contemporary story. This story was very complex because of the timelines that had to string through the book, and I had to track all of the years and make sure the men were in their medical training the right year, and then there's a medical issue that surfaces and the timing of when that came about. I had note cards, I had a big bulletin board, and I wanted to make sure that all of the characters were equally distributed through the novel, and the historical characters more at the beginning and less at the end, and the contemporary characters taking over the novel and more toward the end of the book. So it was, structure became, I think, important.
You mentioned Audible and you can like publishing book on.
So because I am not with a traditional publisher, if you have a certain amount of sales and your publisher has an interest fiscally in having a book, an Audible book, they will support that and they will cut that version of your book. But if you are not with a traditional publisher, it's out of your own pocket, and it is thousands and thousands of dollars. And so to recoup that could be difficult. But people have asked me, so we'll see what if you buy enough books tonight for your friends. Yeah.
Just when you talk about that now, Ronald Bolson,
yes,
husband with brothers, spoke here.
Yeah.
And he said in his first novel, there were 1,000 books they had delivered to his home.
Yeah.
And he carried them out to everyone to show the publisher, see how great all these books went.
Right.
And he ended up paying for all of them.
Oh, yeah.
So, did you follow the people, your subjects who you met? Do they know what you were done with them?
The subjects who I've met, the people who are real.
The women at that you got their stories. She imagined the stories. Well,
yes.
Yeah, but I'm saying you had all these women that you didn't just imagine, did you? I mean,
are you saying the women at the conference who I met?
Yes, yes.
So this is not their stories.
Okay.
These are stories. These are characters that I made up that are a conglomeration of some of the wives who I have met along the way. Yes.
Okay, so
so they wouldn't know, it's not someone in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. But there are a few characters, and in fact, there's one in particular who some of you will know, and she won't mind if I tell you. Sylvia Seltzer, who is in this community, is Sylvia in the book. It's really not Sylvia; it's the parody of Sylvia, who very nicely gave me a tour of Barbados when I was down there on business with my husband. And she has a home there. So she really knows the island. and took me all around. And so that moment really stayed with me. And I brought one of the other wives with me who wasn't Jewish. So I was Jewish, this other one who wasn't Jewish. And I also planted a seed about who Dina and Julie would be and their reaction on the tour, what it would mean to them. So I took Sylvia out about a month ago for lunch to thank her and to give her the book and say, you really should read this before it comes out. And speaking of that, there's also a physician in town. And I changed his name a little bit, but not enough. And I don't know how many of you went to Dr. Panza for your children when they were little. Okay. So he's in practice in Westfield. He's still in practice. His daughter's now in practice with him. Very handsome man. And I was there every 3 days with my kids because I have 3 kids who are very close in age and someone always had an ear infection. So I was always there. And so were my friends. And one of my friends in particular and I had a crush on him because we never saw our husbands. We never talked to men. Here was a guy who was taking care of our kids, who was calming us down, and he dressed beautifully on top of everything else. So we would have these stupid conversations like, did you like his sweater? Did you believe how it went with his eyes? You know, crazy, crazy stuff. And so I was on an airplane coming back from Florida, probably within the last 6 months. And I knew the book was coming out, and we had masks on, at that time on the plane, so you can probably date when it was. And who comes marching down the aisle, but Dr. Panza, otherwise known as Dr. Green Eyes, and he has these amazing eyes. It's all right, he knows, I have a crush. And I said, hi, it's Debbie Feldman, I don't know if you remember me. He said, of course I remember. My kids are 30, 34, how many women has you met along the way with your kids? Why would you remember me? Whatever. So I said hello, and he sits down, and his wife comes down and sits down next to him. And I said to my husband, oh my God, I called him Dr. Panzano. Why did I do that? Why didn't I change the name more? It just hit me. And I thought, I have to warn him because he's in the book. So I went over and I kind of told him, ha ha ha. And I said to his wife, you all have a crush on him. Oh, she's very nice, right? Not having it. But anyway, so there are a couple of characters that are a little more real than others. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Can you give us a little preview about the next novel? Sure. So I really like this novel. Although it's not a continuation of the Convention of Wives at all. It shares thematically with the first novel in that both stories are about what happens when people with different backgrounds come together and have relationships. And not just love relationships, friendships, or become part of each other's family in some way. Is there trust, mistrust? Are the bonds strong? Can they be broken easily if something bad happens, something stressful happens? So that both of the novels have in common. But Mahjong at Maros is really the story of a group of, well, it started out as a story about a group of seniors who start playing Mahjong at Maros Cafe, which is right down the block here, because a lot of them have lost family in the area and friends in the area. They're on in years and they're looking for new connections. So they come together not knowing each other, and it's about their story. But I will say that there is an African-American nurse's aide to one of the women. And when I started, she was a supporting character and she really became the main character. And that happens sometimes. You think you're in charge as the writer, but the characters really, at some point, are in charge. And so it's really her story as well, and that of her teenage son. So that's Mahjong.
The narrator of the story?
No, it's not told in the first person, it's all third person. So it's about them and what happens through the author's voice. Yeah. And there's a lot, about local scenes and things. So, and it's all contemporary. It doesn't go back historically at all. It's probably a little bit easier to follow.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.